Okay, good evening, everyone, both online and live. I suppose just 2 words of introduction about our new sukkah, which is Muktza. So it swiftly became apparent to me that there's no way to start Muktza without sort of plunging in on the deep end. And at the beginning, I was thinking of trying to sort of give some introductory shiurim in which we went through sort of the basic structures of Muktza and the various sorts of significant arguments and the concept. And it swiftly became apparent to me 2 things. One, that I couldn't cope with that, it was overwhelming. And 2, that it would prove overwhelming as a share. So instead, what we're going to try and do this organically. So we'll try and just learn the Gemara and pick up over time and see what emerges from the sukkahs. And I'll try, whenever there's a sort of general Muktza concept that comes up, I'll try and just present a little bit of the background to it and sort of control the flow of information, because otherwise it's going to be overwhelming. That will be the challenge of Muktza. This is a little bit of an experiment for this chaburah. Till now we've done relatively bite-sized sukkahs. Melachos, Halachos, brachos. This is a massive sukkah. I mean, Muktza is a sort of shas sukkah. So we'll see how it goes, and in the meantime, we'll plod along. And in the worst case, we'll have learned a bit of Gemara. In the best case, maybe we'll come out with something. So that's not a good marketing line, but it's the best I can do. So we'll just learn the Gemara. That's what we'll do. Learn Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, Rishonim, and just see what comes out of all of that. So that's the plan. So let's start with the Mishnah. And the Mishnah says, "Ein moistin kli tachas haner, the kabel b'os Hashem," and you can't put a keli under a lantern, a lamp, and there doesn't mean a fire; it means the lamp itself, to receive any dripping oil. If you put it there from before Shabbos Mutter, that's allowed. And you can't get benefits from it, from the dripped oil. If you because it's not muchen, translation is Muktza. Muktza means something which is not muchen for Shabbos use, not prepared for Shabbos use, and therefore it's Muktza. Now, just very briefly, Rashi already tells us what the reason for ein nosin kli tachas haner lekabel b'os Hashem. I think when you go through the Gemara, I don't know how far people have gotten the Sukkah. The Gemara really gives 3 reasons for this issa, and Rashi brings, I think, 2 of them. Rashi says you can't put the kli tachas haner to receive oil that drips out. And one explanation is because he says that the oil is Muktza, and one explanation is because you can't move a keli on Shabbos for something which is ein nitol. In other words, one of the principles we'll learn about Muktza is that it's a mistake to always think of Muktza as being that an object is Muktza or an object isn't Muktza. A better way to think of it, at least sometimes, is that the hishtamshus of an object is Muktza. There can be particular uses. An object is a keli, is an object that carries a certain functionality, and functionality defines the name of what the object is. So just to sort of bring out this point, a pen is an object where its defines use, or its set aside use is for writing. You can write with other things. You can write with lipstick, or you can write with a ketchup bottle, but it doesn't define what the functionality of the keli is. So a keli has functionality, and sometimes utensils have a variety of functionality. One of the reasons, or one of the ways of understanding why, let's say, even a klisha melachot le'issa, something which is its main functionality is issa, like a pen, nonetheless, you can use it l'tzorech gufoy. That means you can use it for other mutter uses. You can use the pen if you need to as a prop to hold down some papers in the wind, or to hold a door open or something like that, is because since it's a utensil, it's omeid, it's set aside for human use, and therefore it has a series of functionalities. Its functionality for one thing, for writing, is Muktza, but for other functionalities, it's muchen, because every keli, every utensil, is muchen for human use. So we'll hopefully get this more sophisticated as time passes, but we need to get used to thinking about Muktza as not necessarily being about an absolute state of the object, that the object is Muktza, but rather the hishtamshiyos of the object is Muktza. Now, based on that, again, we'll have to look at this in more detail. Rashi brings the first explanation Rashi brings as to why I can't put the keli to catch the drops of shemen is because the oil as it drips out is Muktza, and therefore using a non-Muktza keli to catch the oil drops is using a nakli nitol, you can only move a keli l'dova hanitl for the sake of something which isn't muktzah. If I'm using a utensil, a non-muktzah utensil, but for the sake of a muktzah use, it's muktzah for that type of ishtamshus, and therefore I can't move the kli for dovash for a tzorech of a dovash ein nitl. That's the first explanation that Rashi gives. Now, there's a part of the Muktza halachas are that even what I call a non-Muktza keli can't be used for a Muktza use. And if you're using it for a dovash ein nitl is a Muktza use of a non-Muktza utensil. That's the first explanation that Rashi gives. And again, we will see later on in the Gemara as we get deeper into the sukkah. For example, we will hopefully look later at the sukkahs in Kuf Chaf. There's another sukkah of Muktza that we'll get to one day in Kuf Chaf Beis to Kuf Chaf Gimel, Kuf Chaf Daled. Over there, the Gemara brings a view of Rava. For example, Rava holds that even a klisha melachot la heta can't be used for all sorts of things. We're used to saying klisha melachot is the Muktza, klisha melachot heta is not Muktza. But Rava holds even a klisha melachot heta has certain hishtamishiyos that it's Muktza for. So here Rashi is saying, it's not Rava's opinion, but he's saying a more general view, that even something which is a mutter, you can't use for a dovash ein nitl for the purposes of a mukta use, because with respect to that use, it isn't mucham. It's a regular kli, a chumish, a sefer, a spoon. The spoon is mucham because it's not mukta, but it's mucham for what? It's mucham for non-mukta uses, but it's not mucham for a mukta use. So that's the first explanation that Rashi gives. And already there from this first test of Rashi, it's really Gemara. Rashi, we're already, for us who are now dipping our toes into Muktza, sort of learning that we need to be a bit more nuanced about how we think of Muktza, and we can't always answer the question, is this Muktza or is it not Muktza? Very often the answer will be, with respect to this Ishtamshus, it is Muktza, with respect to that Ishtamshus, it isn't Muktza, and therefore Rashi is saying that every Keli has an aspect of Muktza to it. It's always Muktza with respect to a Ishtamshus for the use of Muktza. That's the first explanation in the Sugya as to why the Keli is not nitl for catching the shemen hamatafti. That's the first answer, Rashi.
Sorry, can I just ask on the Rashi? Just I'm not exactly sure how, like the parsing or the syntax. So ein kli nitl b'Shabbat, because and you seem to translate that as that is a non-muktzah keli. And sorry, davar hanitl means something that is muktzah. So what? I don't understand how we're using nitl.
No, it can only be taken. Sorry, ein kli nitl b'Shabbos. A keli can only be taken on Shabbos with tzorech davar hanitl for the sake of something that can be taken. In other words, you can only take or use a kli on Shabbos for the sake of something that can be used, but not for the sake of something that can't be used.
Okay.
Sorry.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. The oil can't be used. Sorry, yes. So since the oil is a davar she'eino nitl, therefore, I can't take even a kli that's nitl, i.e. a kli that can be moved, i.e. a kli that's muchon, isn't muchon for oil, which is a davar she'eino nitl, which is something which isn't movable.
Why Rashi doesn't just say something that's
We'll see later when we look at the phraseology of the Gemara what some of these terms mean. It's a good point. I'm finding a way as a high order question that I'm not ready to handle yet. What's the difference between these? I don't know if we will ever get answers to these questions, but exact definition of the difference between muchan and eina nitl and various other things. But some of this will come clear later. But I'm not sure if we'll get full answers to these questions. So that's sorry. Little nothing. Okay, so that's the first line in the Gemara. Inami kasova also levatel kli mehechanoi. You can't be mevatel a kli mehechanoi. Lahoishiv kli b'mokum shelo yochal od litlo, to place a utensil somewhere where you won't be able to move it anymore. So havik gavelo mokum. It's as if you're fixing a place for it, and chabru b'tit, and fixing it with cement. V'domi l'melacha. It's similar to the melacha. Klizer, sorry, there's no space. When the shemen hamuktzah falls in it, yehi also the taltel, it'll be also to taltel it. So again, this is really a Gemara later, and we'll look at this in more depth when we learn the Gemara later. But the second explanation Rashi is saying is that there is a nissa called mevatel kli mehechana. That's a direct quote from the Gemara. That mevatel kli mehechana means to cancel a kli or negate the kli from its preparedness. In other words, if I put the kli under the tiftuf shemen, I'm mevatel kli mehechana. I'm making it cease to be a keli which is muchan, because now that it's received the Muktza shaman, it in turn becomes a receptacle for Muktza, and therefore I've been mevatel the kli mehechonoi, and there is a problem in so doing. Now Rashi here says the problem in so doing is I'm fixing it in its place. Sounds a bit like the melachot of bono or something like that. I'm fixing the kli in its place. Rashi later will give another explanation, and again, we're not going to go into that till we see the Gemara. Rashi later will say it's somehow destructive of the kli because I'm a vatal kli meichono by making it unusable. So either way, this is Rashi's second explanation that being vatal kli meichono is a problem. It's really a Gemara, and the hezbollah of it here, Rashi says, is because I'm fixing it in its place. So, yeah.
At what point when you move up, is it only when the oil actually drips on the plate? Because presumably you put the plate under the air and the oil drips. You could actually remove the plate.
Yes. Yeah, assuming that would be correct. Yes, unless the material is dripping constantly. Yeah. And that would be the difference between the two explanations. The first explanation is that merely using it for the sake of something muktzah is a type of the kli is not muchen for that hishtamshus. It's muktzah for the use of using it. The other explanation would be only the point at which it becomes dedicated for that. As you're asking the question, the truth is I hadn't thought about your question in advance, so I don't know is the real answer. But as you were asking a question, I was thinking maybe, in principle at least, you could begin speculating that the mere act of putting it there makes it muktzah, because it's now dedicated for a muktzah type use. And then you'll have to get into svaras of is your specification of something for particular use enough to make it muktzah or not, and or doesn't need a Masechet to make it muktzah? I don't know. These are the sort of thoughts that your question triggers. But the answer to your question is only when the oil drips into it would it become muktzah. Okay, so this is
this idea of Rashi saying that it's chaburah betit, as if it's fixed, making associated with bono in some way. Does that imply that Muktza, in a general way, it has to be associated with a particular malacha? It's a gezerah against associating with a particular malacha.
Okay, so not necessarily. It's an interesting question. There is a concept called mevatel kli meichono. That's what we see from Rashi. You're really quoting the Gemara. Is this concept of mevatel kli meichono fundamentally a Muktza type halacha? Not necessarily. Since there is a halacha of Muktza, it means that if I put the keli there, the keli will become Muktza. If it becomes Muktza, it will become stuck. What's the problem with causing a keli to be stuck in its place? So either some sort of gezerah of binyan or some sort of gezerah of sosa, one of the two. But that's not necessarily a Muktza halacha in and of in itself. So Paul, in your question, you're sort of asking, is Muktza linked to melachos? We'll have to answer that question later. But for now, we're not talking really, we're not talking about Muktza. We're talking about hilchas mevatel kli meichono, which is a separate halacha that happens to be a consequence of the laws of Muktza, rather than a Muktza type halacha in itself. Yeah.
This is something that might be maybe more basic, but there's a concept of Muktza that things need to be set aside at being hashmashos for particular use. And then there also seems to be concepts that by having certain Shtalshus on Shabbos, something which was not Muktza can suddenly become Muktza. Is that the same Muktza both before and during?
Yes, we will touch on this on already on the next onwards. This idea is going to come up. It seems it's the same Muktza. Something can become Muktza because it wasn't set aside before Shabbos, or at the start of Shabbos, in which case Ben Hashmashos would be the determinant of its Muktza status, or it could have been that it was Muchen at the start of Shabbos, and over Shabbos it loses its Muchen-ness, at which point it becomes Muktza. And this is an example of that. But either way, the end result is the same, that it is now not Muchen, and therefore Muktza. The nafkamina might be, can it switch back and get back to being muchen or not? Again, if it was not muchen at Bein Hashmashos at the start of Shabbos, it may be irreparably non-muchen whole of Shabbos, or to put that differently, because it's katsoi Ben Hashmashos, it's katsoi for the whole of Shabbos. It remains muktzah for the whole of Shabbos. That would be one. That would be in the case of Bein Hashmashos. Whereas in the case of it becomes muktzah on Shabbos, in the same way as it switched on to muktzah, it could switch off muktzah if something changes. However, whilst this is muktzah, and it's identical halacha of muktzah, that would appear to be what comes out. Again, we will look at that on Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. I think the Gemara already brings up given this. That's right. Okay, so that's the that's Rashi. Let's carry on. Mutter says the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, Im nosnu me bodyom. If you put the plate on bodyom, mutter, it is mutter. So Tosfos is already bothered by this language. If you put it there, miboidiom, it is mutter. I mean, if you put it there in miboidiom, it's obviously mutter. Why would something be also to do on Erev Shabbos? I mean, why couldn't you put the plate there? One of the reasons you can't put the plate there, Rashi told us, is because of Mevatel Kli Me'echano. There's no halacha before Shabbos not to make something Muktza, so there's no issue there. Not to be Mevatel Kli Me'echano, I mean, you can do melachos on Erev Shabbos. And the other reason Rashi said is because it's Muktza. Even a Kli Hanittel can only be taken as Sorech Dav Hanittel. You can't say a Kli, that a non-Muktza Kli is Muktza with respect to Muktza uses. Again, why on earth would that apply on Erev Shabbos? So Tosfos on this line in the Mishnah, the one line Tosfos, he says, Haloshon Dachuk, but you can put it there, Miboidiom. So Tosfos is very clear that L'chatchila, you can put it there on Erev Shabbos and there's no problem at all. And the language is difficult because the language sounds like it's b'diavad. If you put it there, Miboidiom, it is mutter. Rashi doesn't comment on this. Rashi seems okay with the language, but Rashi says, what's mutter? I mean, if you put it there on Erev Yom Tov, what's mutter? It's mutter. What's the it? That's mutter. So Rashi answers the question and says, mutter lanichasham, you're allowed to leave it there. By the way, the word l'haniach is a little bit of an unclear word. I'm not enough of a grammarian to go too much into detail of this, but l'haniach can either mean to place or to leave. And the grammarians have told me that even though these words sound similar and look like they have similar roots, they're in fact two separate words. There are two separate words here. This is discussed in the posting also about the correct pronunciation and translation, for example, of loniach to fill in the bracha that we say and various other things. But either way, the hamnichasham means to leave it there. So Rashi translates it as if you placed it miboidiom, you're allowed to leave it there. In other words, we would have had to have a minna that you're not allowed to leave it there because of some issa. Kamashmanon, you are allowed to leave it there. That's how Rashi learns. And it's a chiddush that you're allowed to leave it there. And Tosfos is medaik that sounds a bit b'diavad. Once placed, it's mutter l'nicha there, but you're not allowed to leave it l'chatchila there. And Rashi and Tosfos is bothered by that. He says the language must be lav dafka. And Rashi seems to say there's a chiddush in this allowance to leave it there. So I on the source sheets I printed several different mefarshim on this. The Hagos of Aaron Moshe Horowitz, which was not my own Bekiah, so I saw it brought in. I was using a new Prince for Gemara, which has it a signpost on the sign. He just gives a technical language answer to the problem, and he says that had we said Tosfos' phraseology, Tosfos wanted the Mishnah to say "Miboid Yom Noisin," you're allowed to put it there on Erev Shabbos. So had it said instead of Nosnu Miboid Yom Mutter, it would have said instead mutter litno miboidiom or miboidiom noisnin, then the subject of the Mishnah would have been about Erev Shabbos activities. On Erev Shabbos, you're allowed to put the bowl there. In which case, when it carried on and said ve'ein neyusim, and you're not allowed to benefit from it, that sounds like you're not allowed to benefit from the bowl or the contents of the bowl on Erev Shabbos, which doesn't make any sense. So it had to give not an Erev Shabbos halacha, but an on Shabbos halacha. And therefore it phrased it as per Rashi, if you put it there Erev Shabbos, it's mutter to leave it there on Shabbos. So the Mishnah just said you're allowed to leave it there on Shabbos, and therefore the flow of the Mishnah makes sense, but you can't benefit from it. So you can leave it there on Shabbos, but you can't benefit from it on Shabbos. That's how he explains, that's how Rabbi Moshe Horowitz explains the language of the Mishnah. So it's more of a technical point. Tosfos' phraseology is a good phraseology because it makes it clear you can put it there l'chatchila. The problem is it's a halacha about Erev Shabbos, not a halacha about Shabbos. On Erev Shabbos, you can put the bowl there. But the Mishnah wants to tell us a Shabbos halacha, that you can leave the bowl there, but you can't benefit from the oil in the bowl, and therefore it had to phrase it in that way. That's how the Haggadah Rabbi Moshe Horowitz says it. Yeah.
I thought when the Gemara says Einus in the menu that it would refer to on Erev Shabbos anyway.
Well, I don't know. That would have been the translation of the Mishnah. So we'd have had at least another doichik in language. If the Mishnah says you can put the bowl there on Shabbos, but on Erev Shabbos, but you can't benefit from it, that sounds like it's saying you can't benefit from the bowl on Erev Shabbos. Then I don't know. Either would have had to has another either Tosfos and that would have said Palosh and doichik anyway, or we would have become confused and tried to work out along this. Why it should be asked on Erev Shabbos. So he's just saying it's a technical point. The Mishnah wants to make it clear that we're talking about a Shabbos halacha, not an Erev Shabbos halacha. Is it so clear that the oil is Muktza? I mean, why should the oil exactly be Muktza on Shabbos? Not so clear cut. I mean, we're learning here Hilchos Muktza. In fact, we'll see soon Tosfos, who in Tosfos Damascus Einus and Mimenu, Tosfos will discuss what's the precise nature of this Muktza. It's not so clear cut that the oil is Muktza. So, and in fact, this is not a kasha on a Havamina. This is what the Mishnah means. The Mishnah tells us you're not allowed to benefit from the oil on Shabbos. That's a fact. So, and in a few moments, we'll see either today or next year what in fact is the Issa Muktza in this. Yeah.
Why does a price say both Erev Shabbos or the Erev Shabbos? What Erev Shabbos means before you accept the Shabbos?
Who says both?
I got.
Oh, sorry, I got some.
The third line, the freedom of Shabbos is showing
the Hamas min Amatachit. The Innocent and the freedom of Shabbos, sorry, Hamas min Amatachit, Mary Shabbos. Freedom of Shabbos. So if Eshem Mishum Delav and Misna Le Shapi, Innocent men, the freedom of Shabbos, sorry, Hamas min Amatachit. Mary Shabbos, Innocent men, the freedom of Shabbos, sorry, Hamas min Amatachit, Shabbos. I'm not sure why he says it, but you've drawn to my attention that I slightly misquoted what he said anyway. I think this answers your question. I slightly misquoted. He wasn't saying that we'd have a Havamina that you're not allowed to benefit from it on Erev Shabbos. We would have a minute you're not allowed to benefit on Shabbos from that which stripped before Erev Shabbos. I'm sorry that I shared what he said. I don't know why he says the double language. Yeah. Okay. No. It's late. I don't know to what degree it's a diuk or not. You're right. It's a funny kind of phrase. Yeah. Okay. So that's just what he says as a reading in the Gemara. The Tosfos Yomtov and the Pnei Yeshua say a different explanation. They both say a Havamina, or maybe even somewhat of a maskana, that it's not so lachatchila to set up this arrangement on Erev Shabbos, because there are chashoshas over here, and they both spring from a similar Gemara. They would say though that there's a chashash that to set up this arrangement is there are problems with setting up such an arrangement. The Tosfos Yomtov says the chashash is that you may end up moving the keli, which is Muktza after all, and therefore it's not so lechatchila. You would either have thought it's not lechatchila to set this up, or maybe even maskana as per Tosfos' diuk. It's not lechatchila to set up such arrangement because of a chashash that you may come to move the pot. The Pnei Yeshua links it to a halacha of Yikov Adam Sheferes. So the background to this is as follows: you have a lamp which has a certain amount of oil in, and you also want to feed further oil into the lamp on Shabbos. So you set up a sheferes, a shell, and you put a hole in the shell, and you suspend it above the lamp, and you fill it with oil, and it's matafteif, it drips down from this suspended shell into the lamp and feeds more oil into the lamp over the course of Shabbos. So the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to do such a thing. Now, why are you not allowed to do such things? The Gemara says, because there's a chashash that you will help yourself to the oil that's above the lamp. No one will help themselves to an oil in a lamp on Shabbos, but maybe you'll help yourself to the oil above the lamp. Does everyone clear the scenario? You have a lamp which is burning on Shabbos. You suspend above the lamp a device that will drip more oil into the lamp as Shabbos goes on. The Mishnah says you're not allowed to do this, and the Gemara says the Isser is because maybe you'll come to help yourself from that oil which is suspended above the lamp. Why might you do that? Because you don't see it as connected to the lamp. It's clean. It's not yet burning. It's not gritty. It's just lamp oil above. It's like perfectly clean oil. Why not? Shouldn't I help myself? If I need some olive oil on Shabbos, why shouldn't for my salad? Why shouldn't I help myself to some of that oil in the lamp above? So therefore, you shouldn't set up such an apparatus. Why is there an issa to set up such an arrangement? Why is the Gemara worried that you'll help yourself? What would be the problem with helping yourself to that oil? So there's machlokas Rishonim what the problem is. One explanation in the Rishonim, which was the Rambam in Perish Mishnah, the Havmin of the Rambam, and maybe some other Rishonim, the Raavad and the like, is that by so doing, you are being mechaber es haneh. What does that mean? You're being mechaber es haneh. You have oil burning in a lamp. If you remove fuel from the lamp, that is causing the lamp to extinguish early. So if I have a lamp and I remove oil from the lamp, that would be kiboy, that would be the melachot of extinguishing a light, because I'm removing some of the fuel. So now we have quite a nice conceptual question. If I remove oil that's going to drip into the lamp, is that called mechaber? So you could argue it's called mechaber, it's called extinguishing, because the apparatus I've set up is such that inevitably, as things are, it will drip into the lamp. And if I remove some of the oil, so it won't drip into the lamp, that's oil that was already connected to the lamp, was going to burn, and I'm removing it by stopping it burning. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, at the moment it's not connected to the lamp. It will eventually drip into the lamp, but all I'm doing is stopping that thing eventually happening. But at the moment it isn't fuel for the lamp, and therefore there isn't a problem of kiboy by removing oil that will drip into the lamp. So this is one explanation of the Gemara. Why shouldn't you set up such an apparatus? Because you may remove oil from this sheferes, which is above the lamp, and by so doing, I'm removing fuel, which is meant to be going into the lamp and being burnt by the light, and therefore this is a melachot of kiboy, of removing fuel. That's one explanation of the Gemara. Second explanation of the Gemara, which is the Rambam's explanation, as I think I printed it in source 5, is that the reason you shouldn't do this is because the oil is Muktza. The oil in the sheferes is Muktza. Why is it Muktza? Because it's dedicated, it's Huktzah, to be burnt on Shabbos. And therefore it's Muktza, it's not set aside, it's not Muchen to be used for other uses. Now, in our situation over here, where what I'm catching is not the oil that's going to be burnt, that's going to be fed in, it's not a sheferes that's suspended above the lamp, I'm catching oil that's dripped out of the lamp. The reason of kiboy doesn't make sense, because I'm not extinguishing anything by using the oil, because it's never going to be burnt in the lamp. It's fallen out of the lamp. It's dripped out of the lamp. But Muktza would apply, because this was oil that was meant to be in the lamp. It was set aside for Shabbos burning. It's not Muchen, and therefore if I use it, it's Muktza. That's why it's Muktza in the Mishnah. So the Pnei Yeshua argues that there's a potential gezerah floating around over here. If you learn that the Peshat in the sheferes is that you can't remove the oil because of a fear that you will come to help yourself from the oil, and that would be Muktza, then you could imagine the same gezerah would apply over here. And therefore the chiddush of the Mishnah is no, the gezerah doesn't apply, and you can leave this setup of having a plate to catch the oil set up, and you don't have to worry about the tiftuf hashemen. If oil does drip into the plate, it will indeed make the plate Muktza. That's the Mishnah, the Ein Yosin Menu. But we don't make a gezerah that perhaps you'll help yourself to it and end up transgressing Muktza. So just to summarize, there is a Mishnah earlier which tells us you can't set up a device in which oil is fed into a lamp. Two possible reasons for that. Halacha, either kiboy or Muktza, both are built in a chashash that I may help myself to that oil. So therefore, let's extrapolate to our scenario. Maybe I'll help myself to the oil that's dripped out of the lamp. Therefore, we would have said there should be a gezerah not to set up such an apparatus. Kamash Malon, we don't make such a gezerah. Why don't we make such a gezerah? What's the answer? Why don't we make such a gezerah? So the Pnei Yeshua gives two reasons. Either because we follow the Rishonim who hold earlier that the reason you can't set up the device is because you might come to extinguish the lamp. We're not worried about Muktza. We're only worrying about kiboy, and kiboy doesn't apply in this case because it's oil that's fallen out of the lamp. Or over there's a chashash because it's nice clean oil in a shell suspended above the lamp. This is horrible oil that's splattered out of a lamp. It's dirty oil. It's post-lamp oil. Lamps aren't clean things. They've got soot and chard and so on them. And therefore, we're not worried that you'll help yourself to it because it's charred and ruined oil. So this is the Pnei Yeshua's answer to the sugya. Just to summarize, therefore, again, Tosis is medayik that the Mishnah sounds like it's b'diavad. Tosis doesn't understand why it should be diavad. He says it's perfectly mutter l'chatchila to set up this apparatus. Rashi seemingly in one word answers the question. He says the mutter is going on the lahanicha. You're allowed to leave it there, but we're left unclear what the havamina is that you would have thought you're not allowed to leave it there. But Rav Moshe Horowitz says there's a technical reason over here. The Mishnah wants to emphasize that the issue is the oil on Shabbos, not the oil that drips before Shabbos. And both the Pnei Yeshua and the Tosis Yom Tov say that the chiddush of the Mishnah is we would have thought there's a gezerah not to set up such an apparatus because you might come to move the plate or you might come to use the oil, and we have a similar sort of gezerah from the sheferes scenario, and then there's a discussion to what degree that halacha of sheferes is applicable in our case. You can draw two distinctions. In the sheferes case, you're removing oil that's going to be burnt, and therefore there could be kiboy. Here we're using oil that's already fallen out of the lamp and is never going to be burnt. Number two, in the sheferes case, it's clean oil, it's never been part of the lamp. Here it's oil that's coming out of the lamp, and therefore it's dirty oil, and therefore maybe we wouldn't make such a gezerah, but that's shut in the Mishnah. So with that, we conclude the reading of the first part of the Mishnah. Emir Hashem on Sunday.
Can I just ask a quick question on that, Rabbi?
Yes, yeah, Adam, sure, yeah.
firstly, that just to clarify, that Mishnah you're referring to is Kaf Tet Amud Bet Bameh Madlikin.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, Bameh Madlikin. And why, just silly point, but why in that contraption you're talking about, when the oil goes in, and if you stopped it going in, why, in a sense, it could be a good thing because you're not doing Maveh by letting it go in?
You're correct. You're not doing Maveh. The problem is it's all automated. So the Maveh is the default setting that's going to happen by itself.
So is Maveh a problem? Is Maveh a problem?
No, because you set it up before Shabbos. So the Maveh is not a problem. You set up this apparatus before Shabbos. So the Maveh is not a problem. It's like it's an old-fashioned form of time switch, basically.
Fine.
So the Maveh is all set up before Shabbos. And by you changing the situation, arguably it's a mechaber of sorts. Okay, so that draws us to a conclusion of that part. What I would like to on Sunday in Mitzvah Hashem is look at Tosfos ve'Einiyusin Mimenu, which will get us properly, deeply into Hilchos Muktza and the Machlokas Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda about a little bit about what Muktza is. We'll revisit 20 times more of what this Machlokas Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda is. We're not going to resolve it all tomorrow, all on Sunday, but just that will dip us into this. And then I would like to try and start learning the first. I hope, I'd like to start learning Rav Chisda also on Sunday in Mitzvah Hashem. Start learning Rav Chisda about what the Gezerah, what the reason for Ein Nosin Kli Tachas Haneh is in more detail in Mitzvah Hashem. That's what we'll do in Rav Chisda. In brief, we're going to see 4 reasons, 4 ways of learning Rav Chisda: Rashi, Tosfos, the Shittel Aran stroke, which was by print stroke Ramban, and the Chidushei Rashba in Mem Gimel on base to 4 explanations of the Gemara. That's where things are going. So I've printed that on the source sheet, so have a look at those Mara Makomis. But basically, if you learn it well, you will see that Rashi gives 1 reason, Tosfos gives another reason, the Shittel Aran and the Ramban give a 3rd reason, and the Rashba gives the 4th reason. That's the agenda for us to learn. Okay, I wish everyone a good evening.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
We're not worried about making that's an acceptable flourish.
Yes, yeah, you can make Gezeros for Muktza. In theory, you can make Gezeros for Muktza. Muktza is considered a strong enough Issa Drabonon that you can make Gezeros for it. Yeah.